Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you wherever you are, and welcome to this second global call for our digital delegation of the Justice Coalition of Religious to this year's high-level political forum on sustainable development. And it's my pleasure to greet some of you for the first time as part of this delegation, and others who are returning from our first call as a group in January. For those who I've not met before, my name is Teresa Blumenstein, and I am the global coordinator for the Justice Coalition of Religious, and I will be one of your guides as we prepare ourselves for this annual conference, which essentially functions as the progress review forum for the UN's agenda that we know as the Sustainable Development Goals. So we will begin our session today, as we always do in our time together, with a short prayer to gather us in the way that we are as a spiritual community before we get into some of the technical topics that we will cover together today. So with that, I invite you all into a quiet and thoughtful place in your hearts. Gracious God, yours is the call in each one of us to give a voice to the voiceless, to speak out for those who cannot speak out for themselves, to be present in the places where they have no representation, and to walk alongside them, empowering them to speak. We carry our own burdens, but still you ignite a flame in each one of us to bear the burdens of others, to advocate for human dignity, to serve the common good. We pray that the ears of those in positions of power may be opened to your voice, beckoning them to create the economic, political, and social conditions for the fulfillment of each human person. As we continue on this journey toward the HLPF, open our ears to hear the cries of the poor and the planet, our eyes to see the faces that remain nameless, our mouths to encourage those who struggle to find a voice. Confirm us as both students and teachers, humble enough to be modified by new perspectives, courageous enough to bear witness to the realities of our countries. Prepare our hearts and minds to hold our governments accountable for the promises they have made to help those who are living without a voice. Prepare our spirits to hold ourselves to the same account. Bless us with the courage and conviction to build your city of justice and peace. Amen. And with that, we will enter once again into the next piece of our preparation on this journey from now through the month of July, when the actual days of the forum itself are happening at UN headquarters in New York. But of course, there's much work to be done between now and then. Much is happening in terms of preparation, not only on our part as we train and meet one another, but also on the part of governments who are conducting consultations, who are meeting at the regional level and on the part of other members of civil society, which is a term we use to recognize basically anyone who is not representing government. And we're all getting ourselves prepared, having conversations, and exchanging experiences to find common themes in our observations and our perspectives on how much progress our countries have made or have not made toward achieving any and all of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're going to get into today a bit more detail than we did last time about the forum itself and how it is that we participate as members of this group, civil society. So I'll begin with just an overview of the forum itself and its purpose. And I'm just going to briefly stop sharing because I see we have some kind of stray marking on the screen, and I want to see if I can clear that away by sharing again. Okay, excellent.
Elisabeth, est-ce que tu sens les choses ou pas?
So by way of introduction to the forum itself, I will just describe it as the primary opportunity for a review at the global level of nations' progress toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, which you'll see mentioned again and again throughout this session and all our sessions, the SDGs or Los ODS or LODD, all of which describe this 17-goal agenda that we introduced in our first session, which includes some of the biggest ideas, the biggest challenges that we need to meet as a global community. And within that big agenda of 17, each year, the high-level political forum will focus on a smaller subset of those 17 goals in order to allow for richer conversation about a smaller piece of that very big agenda. So I will describe in a moment where our areas of focus will be for this year. But just to say, when we're talking about SDGs in general, we're talking about that whole 17-goal agenda. And so this forum, as I mentioned, the HLPF, is held annually in New York at UN headquarters in the month of July. And at that forum, when they meet in July, governments have an opportunity to present their progress reports, and they do that on a voluntary basis. They're not compelled or legally bound to offer that kind of progress report. And so for that reason, the reports that are offered by government are known as voluntary national reviews. And so that's another abbreviation that you will hear and see quite often in our sessions and in the forum itself, voluntary national reviews, or VNR or ENV. And another important piece of the forum when it meets in July is that not only government, but also civil society groups have an opportunity to present our perspective on how much progress is or is not being made in each of our nations. And the major outcome that we see from each year's forum is that together governments will produce a declaration, which you may hear referred to as a progress declaration, that essentially is a summary of the observations that have been made about progress or lack of progress on a global level. And the other purpose for that declaration is also to set an intention in a way to say, these are the areas where we're seeing real weakness. These are the areas of real strength. These are places that we need to deepen our commitment or deepen financial investment in order to kind of get back on track so that we are meeting these goals, so that we get where we need to be by this target year, the end year of 2030. So here are those specific goals that we will focus on this year, that subset I mentioned of the whole agenda. And you might hear these come up again and again as well. They are goal number 6, which pertains to access to clean water and sanitation for all. Goal number 7, which is clean and affordable energy for all. Goal number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure to support our sustainable development. Goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities. And that goal kind of relates to a lot of challenges that we see in urban environments, such as housing, especially for those who are among the most marginalized or lowest income communities, that there be inclusive society, discrimination, that there be sustainable waste management, clean air, clean water, infrastructure within the cities, sustainable, meaning environmentally sustainable transportation options, safe roads. These kinds of concepts fit under sustainable cities. And then goal number 17, which is partnerships to support all of the other goals. And that includes partnerships between governments. It includes partnerships between, say, different levels within a country's government, the national, the provincial or state level, the local community governance. And of course, it also includes partnerships between government and civil society and between different entities within civil society, because of course, that is a rather large group that includes many different people who might approach these concerns from many different angles. So this year, there will be 41 countries who have volunteered to present their progress reports, their voluntary national reviews. And among those 41 are several from which we have delegates here in this group, which is wonderful. Those include Burkina Faso, Canada, Chile, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, France, Ireland, Poland, Portugal, Slovakia, Timor-Leste, Tanzania, Venezuela, Vietnam, and Zambia. So you may have the opportunity to see faces and hear voices from each of these countries, in each of these corners of the world in our time and our process together, which will really make for some rich conversation, and I hope perhaps some recognition of patterns and surprising similarities in terms of the challenges we face and the dreams that we hold when we think of sustainable development in our own respective places in the world. So one important thing to understand as we move toward this forum where there's a lot of storytelling, there are a lot of narratives that will be shared in terms of how well is country X, insert the name of your country here, doing in terms of clean water and sanitation, or clean energy, or innovation, or housing in urban environments, or partnerships. This is the question a lot of people will be seeking to answer. in the high-level political forum. And the good news, especially from our perspective, is there's not just one author to that narrative or that story. While the country's national government certainly gets to be the primary storyteller and will be given the most time to tell the story, as you can see from the visual here, where the national government is the big bubble to the top left, and that includes things especially like the ministers for finance and planning, the ministers for the statistics and data collection in the country. Often you will hear from ministers of development, or sometimes if there's a ministry dedicated to women, or environment, or urban planning. These are the type of government representatives that are often present and offering the VNR presentation. But there are also a large community of other stakeholders of which we are a part. And that community includes many kind of smaller categories within civil society. So that includes things like foundations or philanthropic institutions. It includes members of the scientific community, the academic community. It includes folks who are in business and industry, those who are organizing through trade unions or workers' unions, includes persons with disabilities, older persons, non-governmental organizations, children and youth, women and girls, farmers, migrants and their families, indigenous peoples, faith and religious groups, and others. And you'll see I've included 3 stars here to highlight essentially areas or identities that many people in this delegation might identify with, might claim for themselves. And those are non-governmental organizations, women, and faith and religious groups. All of these are some common entry points through which we might kind of see label our perspective and our point of entry. Representatives of religious NGOs. And just as a reminder, because I know this can often come off as a surprise or feel jarring, but within the UN system, we are recognized under the heading of NGOs or non-governmental organizations. I know that's often not the way we would think of perhaps a religious congregation, but kind of in the global scope of things and the way that the UN is organized, that is one of the labels or categories that we fit into. So even if that feels strange to you, if you're simply working on behalf of your congregation, just understand in the language of your group. So fortunately for us, as part of this very diverse community of different stakeholders, there are many different opportunities that we have for input into the high-level political forum. And so that is part of the reason that we begin meeting in January in our preparation, is that many of these channels are either happening in advance of the forum in July, or the preparation for them is starting to happen as early as January. And it only kind of comes to the surface and becomes visible when the meeting happens in July. So among these different opportunities that are available to us, so first of all, there are the narrative we spoke about first, the main speaker that gets to do storytelling is the government making their report over here. So they're the first major contributor to the global narrative on how much progress is being made. But then all of these other channels are available to us in some way as civil society. So that includes that there are regional fora that are actually happening in the next month or two, depending on which region you are in, that we as civil society have the chance to participate in. And I will speak in some more detail about those regional fora as we continue through our time together today. But just to say that each of them is a space where countries within a region of the world have an opportunity to come together and to begin to share their national realities, not only sharing as stories among governments, but again, as civil society, to begin to recognize some common themes, common concerns, to share ideas and solutions. And that is all done kind of as a regional preparation for the Global Forum in July. Then we come to this channel, which is that in many countries of the world, the government, when they are preparing their own presentation, their own report for the high-level political forum, they will have some kind of official consultation process through which at least some members of civil society are invited to participate, to have a voice in the government's report. Now, that channel for input is often a bit fraught. It can be very selective. We might often see that those who have the chance to give their input in the government report are kind of hand selected by members of government. So they might be people who the government perhaps knows are inclined to agree with them or not present an opinion that's very different from what the government is presenting. So we don't necessarily hear a lot of a new or alternative story through those channels, but it very much varies from country to country. So there will be some places in the world where that process is truly open, and you may hear some voices of dissent or disagreement from civil society, or some challenges that are presented to the government from civil society. But as will not be a surprise to many of you, there are, I might say, when the majority of governments in the world are only looking for no more than a little challenge from outside the government in terms of inviting the voice of civil society into their own report. So that tends not to be the most accessible, or in the end, the most fruitful channel of input for civil society in most places. So sorry, that was this box here, the official input. But then there's another process that is open to us, which is that networks of civil society alone that are organizing not under the umbrella or the auspices of government, but just members of civil society, whether they are from that group of indigenous peoples, business, of NGOs, of trade unions, whatever category of civil society might be. In all countries of the world, civil society is forming networks through which it is possible to kind of create their own alternative or accompanying report that can be submitted kind of to the process alongside the report that's coming from government. So some cases you may hear those kinds of reports called shadow reports. So it's essentially kind of trying to present an extra voice or an alternate voice to help kind of round out or tell more of the story that may be missing from the government's report. And so in light of this whole forum and reviewing the SDGs, You will find that there are networks in each country that are organizing specifically to offer this extra voice, this accompanying voice to add, to expand on what the story is that the government will tell. Then another opportunity that's available is there's something within the UN system that kind of helps to organize those categories of civil society that I mentioned on the previous slide, those different groups of stakeholders. And in the UN system, those different groups of civil society stakeholders are known as major groups and other stakeholders. And so through the channel of any of those groups with whom you identify, whether it is as an NGO, as women, as a faith-based group, if you are working in academia, perhaps you identify with that group of civil society. But through each of these groupings, there is a channel for you to come together with other members of that kind of subset or that subgroup of civil society and to organize a response, a statement of some kind, or a question that you might like to pose to your government. And after each government report is made during the high-level political forum, there is an opportunity for each of these groups to have some response, whether it's offering additional comments or asking a question or some combination of the two. So these are kind of where we hear the voice of civil society come into the official forum and into the official space of the high-level political forum during those days in July. It's through these major groups and other stakeholders that we have that voice. Then in previous years, though not in this year, unfortunately, there's sometimes an additional opportunity, which is an open consultation from the UN that is open to all members of civil society just to submit their observations in a particular topic directly into the UN system. That was offered in some previous years. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that open, at least as of yet, for this year. If that kind of invitation does emerge, I will relay it to you. But as of right now, we haven't seen them undertaking that process this year. And then finally, down in the bottom corner here, we have events sponsored by civil society. And that is another opportunity that we will seize together and that we have done in the past, which is that during this forum, like many other UN conferences, we have the opportunity as civil society to host events as part of the official program of the forum. And within these events, we can highlight speakers or visual presentations or statements that kind of, again, offer our perspective, our narrative from our own experience wherever we are in the world. And so these are chances for us to, again, bring a different voice and a different perspective into the overall story. Sorry, and I'm gonna just stop sharing once again to clear markings from the screen. So something that's very important for us to understand as we move toward the forum and try to understand our own role in it is, as I mentioned, that governments do, of course, because it is the United Nations and it is meant to be an institution of all the peoples, but the governments and representatives of government are always kind of the primary speakers, the primary voice in the conversation. And so they are the ones who will be given the most time and the most opportunity to share their perspective on how much progress they're making with respect to the SDGs. But even though they get the most time, there are still many governments. As I mentioned, there are 41 who will be presenting this year. And even though the forum lasts for 2 weeks, it doesn't really, in the end, offer much time for each country to present a truly comprehensive picture of the reality in their country. They are offered basically only 10 to 15 minutes each to make a quick summary presentation of their progress. Now, they do have the chance to submit much more comprehensive reports in writing in advance of the forum, and we will do some study and some exploration of those more detailed reports when we receive them. Unfortunately, we typically get them only a couple of weeks before the forum itself. So we have to, as soon as we receive them, we have to rush to find, sometimes they're very, very long reports, sometimes more than 100 pages. So we just look for the sections that are kind of our area of focus and try to absorb their information and then create a response from our side. But when it comes to the forum itself and the time that's given to actually speak and present the review, the government only has 10 to 15 minutes. And so we find that in that very short time, governments will focus almost exclusively on the positive news or the strength that they're seeing in their progress toward SDGs, which of course leaves many gaps in the story. And they will often include very little or no input from civil society. So even if they did have a very thorough process that brought civil society perspectives into their large written report, we're not very likely to hear that kind of in the presentation that is given live during the forum. So that then becomes an important area for our role as civil society. We are there to kind of observe what's being presented by the governments and to fill whatever gaps are left in their report, in their storytelling, in order to help the world hear and to understand a more complete version of the story, to understand the reality a bit better. And of course, not for the sake of simply hearing our own voices or speaking out of pride to be able to say, this is what we're doing and this is the problem that persists, but to speak about the reality so that we can understand the reality on a global level better, and then we can respond to that reality better so that in the end, the people that we serve, the communities that are the most marginalized, that these communities see real benefit from this major global effort and national efforts that go with it, so that they're not only helping a few, but really reaching all the communities whose well-being is of greatest concern to us. So one of the ways that we can kind of organize or think about presenting our own observations is to help identify good policies or good programs that we're seeing coming from our government, and to encourage those. And we can also identify some of our own good practices and say, you know, this is something that's been very helpful in this community that we're serving, and perhaps could be helpful to move, to scale up to, say, the national level, or perhaps even, you know, it worked here in Zambia, and maybe it would be useful in some form, obviously with adaptation in Vietnam or in Portugal. So we come together to kind of share these observations and ideas, again, not simply to criticize, not simply to say, look at the good work we are doing, but really, again, for the purpose of finding stronger solutions that really serve the communities that are the most excluded, the most marginalized. So one of the other channels of input that I mentioned are these regional fora that are happening very soon in each of your regions of the world. And again, the purpose of each of these regional fora is to begin to gather the knowledge that exists within each region and to allow conversation or dialogue within each region before the governments start making their reports at the national level in order to exchange ideas, strategies, solutions, common concerns at the regional level that can then be kind of more refined and presented at the global level during the forum in July. And the good news for all of us is that some online participation is possible during each of these fora. So while they are all taking place in person in some form this year, thankfully, after being largely online the last 2 years, there's some in-person gathering, but there's also some form of online participation. So the dates for each of the regions, and I hope you will note these because you're all very much encouraged to follow, to the extent that you can, the online components of these fora in your region. So for Africa, it's actually starting today. There is a workshop specifically for civil society. Again, what we know as those major groups and other stakeholders. And so that's kind of a civil society self-organized workshop. That's not an official part of the forum. That's beginning today. Then starting tomorrow for Africa through the 2nd of March is kind of the official program that's happening in person in Niger. But it can also register for participating in that online. And I will send all these links to you as soon as we leave our call today, because that registration for Africa especially will need to register before the end of the day today in order to participate in that online. So I will make sure that you all have in your mailbox immediately after this session, this slide in particular, and it will have links that will take you directly to the registration page so that you can, even if you can't follow the whole forum, I'm sure you don't have the next 4 days available to sit at a computer and follow all of the sessions of this conference. But for whatever piece you are able to follow, or perhaps in many cases, there may be materials that are shared by email or video recordings, things that you could view kind of in your own time. It's great to register, even if you're not sure exactly how much you'll be able to follow as it's happening. So again, I will send those links just as soon as we conclude today. And for those in Africa, especially because the forum is beginning tomorrow, and today is your last chance to register. I hope that you will go directly to that page and register yourselves so that you have the option and the opportunity to participate in some way online. Then for the Asia Pacific region, we will have the regional forum, will have several parts. And unfortunately, the main component, the kind of central official program for this forum is only happening in person, which is in Bangkok, Thailand. However, there are several pieces of it that you are able to engage with online. And one of those is kind of leading up to, preceding the official forum, there is a youth forum that is dedicated directly to this regional forum. And so those who are working with young people, whether in a school setting or perhaps job skilling or training or in some other format, you may be interested in following that procedure, that forum, and that will all be shown on Facebook Live through one of the organizing NGOs Facebook pages. So I'll share the link to that page for anyone who's interested in following that forum. Then there's also a regional dialogue on youth empowerment specifically related to climate action, so environmental action. And so that's also happening and we'll have some side events available online. Then there's something called the People's Forum, which is sort of the civil society forum that will happen alongside the official governmental forum for Asia Pacific from the 24th to the 26th of March. And that also has an online component for which I am searching diligently and writing to some of the organizers to get the link for online participation. So as soon as I have that, I will share it with our delegates from the Asia Pacific region. But at least we have a little more time to get that detail together before late March when that forum is happening. And then there are the side events. So the kind of events or panel discussions that are happening alongside the official program for the official forum. Several of those are being offered online as well. So that's happening between the 27th and the 30th of March. So again, not the main official program online, but many other pieces available for Asia Pacific. Then for those in Europe and North America, you'll be meeting essentially the same time as a regional group. And that one is happening in person in Geneva, Switzerland, but is also essentially available fully online. And there are a series of virtual side events that are available, as well as a meeting, a pre-meeting in advance. So the day before the official forum begins, there will be an online meeting for civil society members as well. So that will all be happening between the 27th and the 30th of March. So for those in Europe and North America, if you are able to find any time in those days to follow some of those proceedings, that will be very informative and kind of foundational experience to help you prepare within your regional community for this global conversation in July. And finally, the furthest out and the one that has the most time to prepare to engage regionally are those in Latin America and the Caribbean. That forum is not happening until late April. So those in Latin America and the Caribbean, we don't have a lot of details yet because it's still so far out. But we do expect that there will probably be a pretty detailed platform created that will allow for some online participation for you as well. Last year, several years, every year thus far, there has been a very thorough website that offered a lot of materials for this region's forum. So I do expect that we will see that emerge sometime in the next couple of weeks. And I will share that information as soon as it becomes available. But the one thing we know right now is those are the dates. So the forum is taking place, the in-person component is in Santiago de Chile, and it will be from the 24th to the 28th of April. So if you're able to just kind of put a marker for that on your calendar, and hopefully we get some detail about how you can engage online as we get closer to those dates. So once again, those in Africa, basically you have to take action right away, register tonight. So your forum is beginning tomorrow through March 2nd. For those in the Asia Pacific region, there are things happening as soon as March 18th, with the official forum starting on the 27th of March and going through the 30th. Those in Europe and North America, you also have events going from the 27th to the 30th of March. And those in Latin America, you'll be seeing your process from the 24th to the 28th of April. Now to one of those other channels I mentioned, which are the SDG progress reports that are being offered kind of independently by civil society networks. So the great news for us is that we are not acting alone even within any country. Though some networks are vast and complex and mature, and some networks are smaller and newer, we do see the presence of at least one network in nearly every nation that is participating in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so that offers us an opportunity to find partners and connect with others who are interested in kind of keeping an eye on what government is reporting and offering additional insights and observations as part of that global conversation. So each of these networks is kind of independently organized. There's no official procedure coming from outside the country that dictates who will lead or how the group will organize. And so every group, every network is employing different methods of collecting input from the various development organizations or community leaders that are operating within their country. But the typical end goal, no matter which country and which network you might be part of, is to generate some kind of independent report that will act as a supplement or complement to the government's report at the HLPF. And typically, participation in these civil society networks in each country is typically open to individuals like yourselves who are representing either an NGO or a faith institution or some combination of those two. So those are typically available to those of us who are really interested in taking the initiative and getting involved. And this is just a selection, but I will share the slides with you later to share a more complete collection of links that take you to the website of whatever the network is that's operating within your country, either at your national level or perhaps for your region. You'll find some countries actually have multiple networks. Some seem to have just one. But I've done my best to gather several different networks together, as many as I can find for each of your countries. And so I will share those links with you so that you have the opportunity to look them up, to find out when they're operating, where they meet, how they meet, to hopefully communicate with some of the organizers and see how you can be involved, how you can be part of the conversation and communicate with others in that network as one important way of adding your voice and your experience to this larger conversation. Then another important channel that's available to us is, again, this official input of these official groupings of civil society in the UN system, which again, we know as major groups and other stakeholders. And that's a term that you will, again, hear many times over. And within this body of stakeholders, you'll find that there are teams that are formed for each of the countries who are reporting to this year's HLPF. And so they are organizing and starting to get organized now. to create, first of all, a position paper that they will deliver and present during the forum that offers their kind of general global observations about progress toward the SDGs, including some more detailed examples and ideas that come from several different countries. And they will also be, again, the ones who have the official voice, the official opportunity to speak for civil society during the days of the forum itself. So basically, the only times that you will see someone who's not representing government, sitting at a microphone in a UN hall, speaking for a civil society experience, that will be someone who has joined one of these teams that's under the major groups and other stakeholders. And so they will, when they're sitting there behind that microphone, have the chance to ask a question of the government that has just given their report, their presentation, or to offer some reaction, some comment to that report. And so this is a really unique and special opportunity for each of you if you wish to take advantage of it. You are able to submit a form that I circulated the link to at the end of our first session, and then sent several times in email, talking about joining a country team or VNR team for your country. So again, this is kind of the last chance for you to join one of those teams, because again, like so many other groups, they're preparing now. They're connecting people who are participating from the same country to begin a conversation now, so that you can start to organize your thoughts and talk about what kind of important points or questions that you might like to present to the government during the forum. And not to say that you would likely you wouldn't be the one speaking unless you are going to be in New York in July, but to be part of the team that creates the response or chooses the question is a way to have your voice in the room, even if you are not in the room, and more importantly, to have the concerns of your community or your country in the room, even though you are not. So we really, really encourage anyone who's even curious about how to participate in one of these teams for your country. Really encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to follow that link that was in my email. Just below, there was the registration link for this call, and then below that, another link encouraging you, or actually above that, another link encouraging you to join one of these country teams. I really hope that you will consider that. And it says here by 3rd of March, that's actually a typo. They may have it still open, but to be safe, I really encourage you to complete that form today or tomorrow at the latest, just to be sure that you will definitely have the chance to be part of one of those teams. Then finally, the position paper I mentioned that submits kind of this more detailed, broader report from civil society to the official forum. It will focus on the priority SDGs, again, which were related to water and sanitation, to clean energy, to industry and innovation and infrastructure, to sustainable cities, and to partnerships. So that will be the focus of that position paper that will be presented as civil society's perspective and input to this forum. And it tends to also, in addition to focusing on those priority SDGs, it will highlight the interconnections between those SDGs. So where we perhaps see a clean energy initiative that's also providing support for the provision of water, perhaps an electrically powered water pump in a community might be an example of that kind of interlinkage. So that's kind of another approach that we tend to see in that paper. But that is crafted again by a team of volunteers, people who come forward and say, I'd really like to have a voice in this. I'd really like to help and to bring the concerns of my community into this global presentation. And I'd like to do it in writing. I'd like to work with other people who are from my country and or who share my area of concern to present this in writing to the world. So this is another very interesting opportunity that's available to you. And if you're interested in being part of the team that creates that paper together, then you should follow the link that I'll share after this call today and sign up to be part of that team and to see what it's about and see how you like it. And then finally, I also mentioned a series of events that we are able to organize as civil society to bring our faces and voices into the conversation. And so these events are typically in the form of panel discussions or some kind of interactive dialogue that feature our perspectives as civil society on SDG progress. And we will, as JCoR, as this group, organize
Teresa, this is Barbara.
Called the SDG Labs.
I would like to say that there was a chat in French that they're having difficulty hearing. I don't know if it's their problem or something else. I just want to let you know that.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. So we'll just say then, Pascal, if there's anything you can do to increase your own volume, that will be helpful just in case it's on your end. May or may not be, but if you can, thank you, Pascal. Thanks, Barbara. Continuing to speak about one way that we will organize ourselves and offer events as JCoR, as this delegation during the forum, will be through what we call the SDG Lab. And this will be a series of interactive dialogues that will be dedicated to each of these priority SDGs. So again, the water, the clean energy, the innovation, the sustainable cities, and partnerships. So we'll have one session dedicated to each of those themes. And you, as JCoR delegates, are asked to contribute to at least one of these sessions. And contribution means, offering your insights, participating to share what you see as progress or lack of progress toward that SDG in the community that you serve, or to share a good practice or a recommendation that you would like to see in your country in order to achieve that SDG, or a good practice that you are already seeing, perhaps a project that you have engaged in yourself or that your congregation has been a part of in the country that you would like to speak about to a larger group. And once again, these kind of offering good practices is always coming from a place of, for the sake of exchanging solutions, exchanging ideas, not about boasting, but simply to help us all move forward together to educate one another. So that's what this exchange will be about. And so you're also able in each of these sessions to invite other members of your congregation or your local community who may wish to come, to listen, to learn. These will be conversations that feature your voices as the delegates of JCoR to the forum, but they will be open to others beyond this delegation to come and listen and hear your ideas. So before I move on to the very next steps, I want to pause and first of all, close that screen so I can see everyone's faces as I've been talking quite a long time and had not had enough chance to see you yet today. And I also want to, let's see, check in with our chat box again. Okay, so it's just that audio concern there. So I want to ask if there are any questions that anyone has at this time after all of that sharing, all of those many concepts and ideas that have been poured out upon you in a short time. Does anyone have any questions or comments that you might like to share at this time? And yes, I see the request to share the links so that you're all able to prepare yourselves well in advance. And yes, I will. So each of the slides that you saw so far in the presentation, there were very, very many links to register for all of the forums, to find the civil society network that's operating in your country. There are links to accompany all of those. So I will share them with you after our session today. And I will begin especially by sharing the slide for the regional fora, because that one for some, especially those in Africa, requires very immediate action. So I will be sure to share that immediately after we close our call today. So especially if you're in Africa, please look at your mailbox as soon as we leave our call today and you'll find the link there to register for your regional forum. And I see the hand of David Muzama. David?
Yeah. Bonjour. C'est une grande opportunité de faire partie de cette grande conférence.
Hello?
Alors,
I can't hear him.
Vient d'être dit pour se faire enregistrer.
Sorry, David, we're having some difficulty. We're having some difficulty hearing you.
Yes, probably there's a bit of. Okay.
If it's possible,
Yes.
it sounds like your microphone something may be touching it, so the sound is getting muffled a little. If it's possible to clear that, maybe it may help.
Are you listening me now?
Yes, I think it's better.
So I don't know, may I speak in English or French?
You can speak in French or English. Oh.
So, je voulais savoir.
I wanted to know
à l'enregistrement que nous devons
with regard to the registration
qui sont établis sur la liste des questionnaires. Alors,
on the list of questions, the questionnaire you sent for those who are not member of any organization.
qui n'ont jamais expérimenté. Voilà un peu ma question.
So his network is very bad. After I didn't hear the second part of his question. It was about not being member of any organization.
Okay, so I think I may understand where the question is going. If you let me I'll bring the form onto the screen so that we can all see. So this is the form for those who wish to join one of the country teams, those who will ask the question and offer the response after a government gives a report. So the form looks like this. And I believe the question from David is, if we go down to question number 3, it asks for an organization. So you can either use the name of your congregation here. You can, if you belong to an institution, if your ministry is offered through an institution like a school, a hospital, a community center, some type of institution, you can also use that here as your organization.
Okay.
If neither of those things seems to be an option, if you are not yourself a member of a congregation, and then probably the name of the organization or the group with whom you work would belong here. If neither of those seems right, it's also possible to write Justice Coalition of Religious here. But if you're not sure and you want to specifically ask if your organization is the right name to write there, or what the right answer is there, you can also write to me directly to get confirmation. And I would be to look at what your response is to the form. But the nice thing about these groups is these teams are open to even those that do not have an accreditation with the UN, the way that our congregations do. So even if your institution is not formally connected to the UN system, you're still able to put that institution name here and then continue on to complete the rest of the form. And I will add with regard to question number 7 as well, this one, is your organization affiliated with any of the following constituencies? So you may recognize that the options listed here are the very same options as the groups that I was mentioning before, those major groups. So you can select anything here that feels appropriate, that feels the best way to describe your organization or institution. So for most of us, that would be either this one, the NGOs, or potentially if you wanted those with women's congregations, it could be this group. But if you're working in a different sort of space, if you're working in an educational setting, you could choose that approach. If you're working on behalf of children or young people, you could take the approach of children and youth. If you yourself are a member of an indigenous community or a person with disability, you could potentially select one of those. But if you're not sure, if all else fails, you can definitely select this one, the NGOs. Because in the eyes of the UN system, we all fit into that category. And David, I'm not sure if we got your entire question, but I do hope that was answered there. Okay. So now, are there any other questions from anyone in the group, or comments, reactions are also welcome?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. Thank you very much.
Teresa, please mute Henry Ramirez.
I'm
Thank you.
I'm trying and it doesn't seem to be letting me. I do apologize for that. But Henry, if you are able to mute yourself, that would be helpful. As I, for some reason, don't seem to be able to. Okay, and I also see the hand of Andrea Machuca. Andrea? Sorry about that. As the internet cut, I was inviting Andrea Machuca.
Sí, buenos días.
Good morning. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. It was very clarifying for me with the terminology especially. And I have a question. In some Latin American countries, you mentioned some links that could allow us to get more information or participate something with the SDGs, but I didn't see Venezuela there. So I don't know if I can connect with the networks in my country or if there is any way in which I can participate. I didn't see Venezuela there.
Yes, excellent question. And Andrea, yes, there is a network for Venezuela. And in fact, that slide you saw was a much longer list. So not all the countries were there on the slide that was visible. But there is a more complete list that I will share with you all that has each of your countries. So for both Venezuela and anyone else, if you didn't see your country within that list of civil society networks, don't worry, you will receive that information and a way to connect with the civil society network in your country. I've gathered them all up and we'll give them to you in one list. So yes, that opportunity is available to you. And I also see the hand of Franco Torres. Franco?
Merci beaucoup pour la présentation. C'est très important, très utile aussi.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really important. I have a few questions.
Sur Venezuela.
So the first one was about Venezuela. Among the networks of the civil societies, I haven't seen the Congo. Maybe if we go over the list, we can find it. So in the Congo to Roja Dominique is the person to... There's too much chaos and a disconnection, too much chaos and disconnection. So the question was, what I understood from the question is mainly the contact between the Claritin Institute and the UN.
So Franco, we may not have heard your entire question, so I'm going to try to answer. And if I don't answer your question directly, then we'll try to hear you again. I think what you're asking is about how you can connect with your point of contact, or how the Claretian group is connected to the United Nations. And so that for that, so each of you is coming from a congregation or an institution that has a connection to a congregation who has an accreditation with the United Nations that allows for you to be part of many different UN conferences. And this is one of those conferences. And so with that accreditation, we are in a sense considered like consultants, in that we as civil society have some important information to contribute to the global conversation. And importantly, we have things to say and to share that governments don't know and governments don't understand, because they're not working, for the most part, government representatives are not working on the local level. They are not living in some of the most marginalized or excluded communities, the way that your congregations often are. And so for that reason, you have observed things, you have insights about what kinds of solutions and programs are working for the most excluded and which kinds of things are not working or simply just don't exist where you are. They don't seem to apply. And when you hear the government speaking about them, you think they're speaking about a different country because you've never seen the program or the benefit that they're describing. And so that's why we are invited through this accreditation process of which the Claretians have taken advantage. We are able to take advantage of the opportunity to be part of the conversation, to bring those observations from, from, as you said, from the Congo, from the real Congo, the experience of people who are not in government or who are not living in capital cities, and who are not seen by those who are making decisions in government on a regular basis. And so through this connection that we are able to participate not only in this UN conference, but in many other UN conferences, occasionally to communicate directly with government representatives throughout the year, to organize events, particularly the channel for input that I mentioned, which is to organize events at the high-level political forum. That's something that's only available to those who have this accreditation like the Claretians do. So it's in some ways, it's a special opportunity that's available to us as members of this network of accredited organizations or congregations. That's not open to kind of the general public. And then there are some channels that are open to the general public, anyone who has the time and the energy to contribute. So I hope that I have addressed your question if we understood it correctly, but please raise your hand again if we've missed the meaning of your question, Franco. Okay, I think we're good with Franco then. So I will go then to Justine Capem.
Oui,
Justine,
bonjour. Je ne sais pas si je me fais
Good
entendre.
morning. I don't know if you can hear me.
yes, we hear you
D'accord.
now, Justine. Thank you.
Yes, oui. I'm very happy.
La première fois, la première rencontre, j'ai été empêchée. Et celle-ci, je suis venue avec un
losing
léger
her.
retard.
I got connected a bit in delay due to technical problems. I want to thank Teresa for the explanations she just gave around how and when and what to do. I was unable to understand what to do and how to enroll in this. And after following the last part of this meeting, I was able to understand, but I'm worried about knowing how, as a group, after giving after confirming my participation in name of the group of my regional group, you said that we need to come up with answers to give to the governments after they present their reports. My question is, what is the impact we can have once we give our responses to the government's reports? Because the governments already present their reports. Can we make an impact? Do we make them change their reports? I'm wondering, why can't we formulate questions and address them before the governments share their reports in July? And with regard to the objectives, I tried to get informed because I wanted to start working in my level, but I realized that in our country, we are not very well informed about the objectives, the ODD, and I find some difficulties at this level. It's a bit difficult. Not everybody is informed. What am I supposed to do? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justine, for both of those great questions. I like that you are thinking in the big picture and very conceptually, and that's excellent. So first, to address the question about, why isn't there a way, or is there a way for us to kind of offer our inputs in advance to inform the reports, because once it is presented, we're not likely to see someone go back and edit and then reissue a revised version of the government's report. So, it's a very valid concern and question about whether it's possible, what effect do we have? So I have a couple thoughts in response to that. First is that's one reason for sure to participate in the regional forum for your region, which will be, yours is one that's happening starting tomorrow. And to follow that process and to find as much as possible ways to comment or ask questions, or to follow the conversation happening from your government at the regional level in advance of the time that these reports will be finalized. In June is when we usually see them. So that's one way to have a voice before the report is complete. Another, this depends again, I don't know if you were with us yet. Some governments do invite the input of civil society in advance when they are creating their own report. That is, some countries don't offer that option at all. Some countries, government will select people, invite people to contribute, but they're only selecting people who will agree with them, support them, kind of echo the opinion of the government. So in some ways, it's not always very meaningful to contribute in that channel as well. But the good news, I think, for us is even when we contribute in July and we ask questions and we offer kind of additional insights that are meant to fill the holes that are left in the government's storytelling and reporting. This is not only a forum for 1 year, and these goals are not the agenda for 1 year. They are a longer term project of the UN and of all the governments. So the questions and the comments that are presented in the forum in July all contribute to the larger progression, which we see from the time that the goals were adopted and first reviewed in 2016, and will continue being reviewed through the year 2030. So in a way, and I hope that each of your countries will report at least one more time between now and 2030. So in a way, it's a way of having a voice into the next report. And also, in a way, another way of thinking of our role in offering our own story to this forum is not only about critiquing government or critiquing what's missing from their stories. It's about offering our support, our recommendations, our good practices as guidance to them, practical guidance. Because of course, at the end of the day, our ultimate goal really isn't to see words being changed on a paper. Our ultimate goal is for the programs to change, policies to change, and people's lives to change. And that is always an option. That's something that's always on the table. We're always trying to move toward changes for the better in people's lives. And so, anytime a forum is over or the last draft of a report or a statement has been issued, yes, it may be the end for that piece of paper, but people's lives continue, the work of government continues, and for us, trying to support, educate, guide that governance in a better direction, there's no end date for that. There's always, every day is a day that progress can be made in that regard. So even if we can't kind of go back with our comments and make the report better, hopefully what we do by presenting our piece of the story is making the governance better so that people's lives will be better. And so for that, there's never a bad day for that. And it's never too late for that. So I think that's maybe the approach that we can have when we come to the forum itself in July. It's about, at that point, not changing reports, but about changing practice so that people's lives can be better. Oh, and I'm sorry, you had a second question as well, but now I spoke so long about the first. Please, Justine, remind me of the second piece of your question.
Oui, la deuxième question, c'était en rapport
My
avec...
second question was in regard to the objectives. It was not a question per se, but I was just stating that in my country, in my region, there's a lack of information with regard to the sustainable development goals. And I'm also missing information. And I discovered working with you more about it and how countries can play a role and how programs can help achieve them in different countries. So when I wanted to talk about it, about people in consecrated life, I found they didn't know much, but they started looking and learning more about it because of me. Because at our level, we think this is about politics and we can do nothing to contribute. So now we created a sort of curiosity among consecrated life to learn more about them.
Wow, that's excellent, Justine. And I'm glad that you have taken the initiative yourself to go find the information that's not, it's not being handed to you easily. And I think that's a problem and a challenge in many places in the world, and countries of very even, widely varied circumstances. Even I think there are many places that the average person walking on the street has never heard of sustainable development goals. I think that's a big problem everywhere, because it's a tool, as you say, it's a tool that allows us to have a voice and to participate and to contribute. And certainly we're not going to achieve such large objectives without the wisdom and the participation of the whole community. So if the tool is not even known, then we certainly can't expect that kind of broad participation that we need. So I commend you for your effort to find the information and to share it and to interest others. And if there are perhaps more resources that I can send that will be helpful, I'd be very happy to do that, because it's, as you say, a very important first step to participating in a process like this, is to know that it's available, and to know that this conversation is happening in order to participate in it. So I'd be very happy to offer even more information if I can. And I also see the hand of Barca.
Hi everyone. Hello from Canada. Teresa, you mentioned in your presentation that JCoR Lab will have events during high-level political forum. So my question, and you said that organizations that are part of JCoR, they will have the possibility to introduce, to give an input at least to one of the goals, if they want to, one of the focus goals for this year. So my question is, are those events happening in July when the HLPF High Political Forum will be, or they will be happening before that, and how people can take part?
Excellent question. Yes, they will be happening. Those HLPF, our lab, the JCoR lab, will be happening during the days of the HLPF. So we will schedule them between July 10th and 20th. And so in several of our upcoming sessions together, you will be invited to begin to say, okay, I think, considering my experience, my ministry, the priorities of my congregation, I think we'd like to contribute to the session on water or the session on sustainable cities, whatever you choose. And then once we know how many people are interested in each of those issues, then we will select date and time for each of those sessions. But all of that will happen in July. So we will start preparing and planning for how to organize ourselves in the next session together. Thanks, Farka. And now I see the hand of Cedric.
Yes, good evening, Sister Teresa. I'm very happy to listen to you. I'm from Congo, DRC. If possible, you can explain two questions asked by Franco Torres. asking by Torres. We don't understand. You can explain two questions asked by Torres. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just to stay again, the question of Franco was essentially about how our congregations are connected to the UN system, how that allows us an opportunity to have a voice in any part of a UN conversation. And so to rephrase my answer a little as well, the United Nations has a piece within its charter or its mission statement that says that this is an organization primarily of governments, but also of the peoples, all the peoples of the world. And in order for us to come together to preserve peace, to talk about our common problems, we need not only the voices of government, but we need many other voices from society, because very often those who are working in government, they don't know the lives of people who are living, say, in a very rural area, far from the capital city. They don't know the experience of typically the poorest members of the community, because very often we see some of the wealthiest members of our society are those who are in government. I think that's quite true in many parts of the world. So in order to bring more truth and better understanding into the global conversation that happens at the UN, there is a process of accreditation that is available to those who are not government, like all of us. And several congregations, Catholic congregations of women and men religious, have taken advantage of that opportunity, and they have received that accreditation. And so it's through that process that all of you, your congregations, have gotten that accreditation. And so it's through that process that we are all able to come together and to be part of this conversation that's happening at the forum. And it's also through that process that we formed the community that's organizing this delegation, which is JCoR. So I hope perhaps maybe that is clearer now with more explanation, but I'm happy to try again.
Okay, merci. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cedric. Are there any other questions or comments that anyone would like to share? Okay, excellent. So then I will return to our slides once more to talk about where we go next. So our next time we gather as this whole group online will be the 11th of April. So between now and then, you're all asked to do several things, and I will be in communication about them. First is that today, just after this call, I will send you this information, and it will be in each of our 3 languages, so that you can find out more information and register for the regional forum for sustainable development for your region. And again, even if you are not able to sit and follow the entire process for your region, that's very understandable. But I hope that you will register and then, as much as possible, tune in online and hear some of the conversation and perhaps wherever there may be an opportunity to receive documents or reports that are coming from your region, you may take advantage of that. And so I will again share the information with the dates and the links to the different events that are happening in your region so that you can access them online. So I hope you'll each do that. And as you participate in those fora, I just have a few kind of guiding questions that may be helpful to you as you reflect on what you're hearing. And for some of you, you may actually have the opportunity in some events of your regional forum. You may have the chance to speak or to write a message in a chat box. So as you reflect, as you listen and contribute, you might ask yourself, where does my experience, my own experience, not research that I've read or things that I've heard, but my own experience align with the reports and the perspectives that are being shared? So where do I see kind of agreement between my experience and what everyone else is saying? Then you might also ask, where does my experience conflict with the reports and the perspectives that are being shared by others? And then finally, what is missing from this conversation? What additional insights or recommendations do I have to contribute to the conversation based on my own experience that no one else seems to be sharing? So these are kind of 3 points we can return to again and again in a regional forum, when we get to the global forum. Anytime you're in a meeting on the Sustainable Development Goals, you can always return to what's the alignment, what sounds right, what's the conflict, what doesn't sound right to me, and what's missing. What else would I add if someone calls on me to speak? What else could I add that's missing from this conversation? And then again, you're invited to be part of that country team that will respond to your own government's report during the forum. And if you want to do that, I again encourage you to do it today or tomorrow at the latest. They may close the forum after that. And I also want to highlight, if you are from Poland, Ireland, or Portugal, the teams are especially in need of more members for those countries. So if you're from one of those 3 places, very, very encouraged, extra encouraged to join the country team, because you'll probably have a very strong voice in the team if you do. And then for those who are interested in being a part of that written paper that will speak a bit more globally, it will be less country specific, but we'll speak more globally about some of the challenges that you are seeing, and to be part of that longer written paper, the team that's writing that, you can submit your form to say that you're interested in that by the 4th of March. And I will also share that with you again today after this meeting. Then again, I'll also share later the list of links to the different civil society networks that are organizing input in your country. So once you receive that list, I encourage you to try to make some contact with someone who's organizing or leading the network in your country, and to see if there's some way that you can participate, some way that you can contribute to whatever stories they are collecting or the report they may be writing for the forum this year. But the first step of that process will simply be to make contact, either to become a member of the network or to reach out and communicate with the leaders of the network. So once you have those lists, I encourage you to do that. And for example, when you're communicating with those national civil society networks, the first really important thing to do would just simply be to introduce yourself by your name, your congregation, the particular issues or SDGs on which you happen to be working through your ministry, and where you are in the world, where you're serving within your country. You might also ask when you communicate with them, is this network preparing a report for this year's forum to respond to our country's voluntary national report? And if the answer is yes, if they are preparing a report for the forum, then you could ask, how can I go about submitting ideas to that report? Or how can I become involved in the creation of that report? And finally, you, of course, are called to register to join us for our next global call like this one, which again is on April 11th. It will be at the same time as today for most of you. For those of us who are in Europe or North America, we are going to have a time change between now and then. So it will be 1 hour later for us, but for everyone else, it will be the same time as we met today. And before then, I will again send several different materials to each of your mailboxes. The links to connect with your civil society network, links to register for your regional forum, this link again to register for our next call. And one more piece is there will also be an invitation if you'd like to get on a shorter call and a more casual call with the other delegates in this group who are from your same region, just to get to know one another better, to introduce yourselves and share a little more about the work that you do. It's a very nice opportunity for us to become friends as well as colleagues as we prepare for this forum together. So I will also send you an invitation to be a part of that regional call between now and April 11th. So we've got quite a few weeks before we meet again, but as you can see, plenty to do before then. So I will send reminders. I know there's a lot of information here, but I will send all of these slides as before and all of this information to you by email. So please be sure to look for any message that's coming from this address here, JCoR.New York. Anytime you see that address, it will be information about this delegation and our preparations for July. And so with that, I will conclude our call for today. I thank you all once again for being here, for your presence and your attention, and your kind listening to me share so many details with you. And I look forward to, as we continue through the process together, that there will be more time in future sessions for me to be the one to do the listening and for you to do the teaching. So I thank you once again. I look forward to seeing you April 11th and perhaps in a regional call before that. And please watch for my emails. Thank you all and have an excellent remainder of your night or your day. See you next time.